Hello and welcome to episode number 362. This is the Project Management Podcast at pm-podcast.com, and I'm Cornelius Fichtner. Before we start, please don't forget we are a listener-supported podcast. If you enjoy our interviews, then please visit pm-podcast.com/premium. Your subscription will help keep us going. Are you thinking about how to get PMP certified and wondering whether you should take a PMP bootcamp, a PMP class, maybe hire a PMP trainer, or whether you would like to achieve this certification simply through PMP self-study? Well, we have the answers for you in this interview with Jim Kokenauer. Jim is an experienced PMP trainer, and he and I look at the benefits, disadvantages, cost, and other factors that you should consider before deciding which way you want to go. But even if you have already decided that maybe a PMP bootcamp is for you, then I recommend that you should still listen to our discussion, because I also ask him to share with us his tips on what you should and what you should not be including as part of your PMP exam prep. So, close those books for a bit and enjoy the interview.
The Project Management Podcast's feature interview.
Today with Jim Kokenauer, professional trainer, coach, and consultant. Hello, Jim. Welcome to the Project Management Podcast.
Thanks, Cornelius. I'm excited to be here.
Now, before we get to the central topic of our discussion today, we want to talk about ways how you can prepare for your PMP exam. Why don't we start with some action items, some tips for our listeners here? Please tell me, from your perspective, what are the top maybe 3 to 5 must-dos, the things that every PMP student simply has to go through as they are studying for their PMP exam so that they are prepared?
Oh, that's a great question, Cornelius. I think the biggest thing that most people fail to realize is how much effort goes into preparing for the exam. So I think they have to make the conscious decision that they want to pass the exam and put the effort into passing the exam. And in order to do that, like any good project manager would, you're going to have to come up with a study plan. So your study plan is going to be very critical to your success of knowing how much studying you need to do, and then also whenever you're able to take the exam. The second thing I think people need to do is to practice taking good quality practice questions over and over. It's, as you mentioned, it's like practicing for a marathon. You have to build up your stamina to run a marathon. The same thing sitting for the PMP exam. It's a 4-hour exam, and you have to practice taking questions over and over again. In addition, you're actually going to use those practice questions as learning aids. So when you read a question and you answer it, not only do you want to understand why you got it wrong so you can improve, but you also want to read the questions and understand why you got it right to confirm your knowledge, but also to confirm that you just did not get lucky taking that practice question. I think a third tip is you need to practice out writing your brain dump. Your brain dump can be used in the first 15 minutes when you go to take the exam. Write out everything that you want to write out that you can use as a reference point for the exam itself. I strongly recommend that you write out all of the formulas, in addition to writing out page 61 off the PMBOK guide. That guide is going to help you answer questions because many of the questions are going to ask you, what are you currently doing and what do you need to do next? And using your process chart from page 61 of the PMBOK guide is going to help you answer those questions. And those would be my recommendations to preparing for the exam, things that you have to fundamentally do.
All right. So to repeat, you need a plan, you need to practice with good questions, and you also have to have a brain dump, right? And now, on to our main topic. We want to discuss the 3 types of PMP exam preparation study approaches that one could choose. And here we're talking about boot camps, coaching, as well as blended training. Let's begin with a quick overview here. If you could just give us, sort of the 10,000-foot overview. What are PMP boot camps?
A PMP bootcamp is typically an instructor-led course that's going to last somewhere between 4 and 5 days, where the instructor presents a lot of information specifically related to the preparing for the exam. It's a very focused course, but it's teaching you what's on the exam and the content you may see on the exam. So it's highly intense.
All right. Then what is PMP coaching?
Coaching is works with the student either in a one-on-one session or in a group sessions where they help assess the student's needs. They determine where the students may lack knowledge. They're going to help them recommend a study plan. And then this way, the students typically are doing some sort of self-studying or they've already gone through an exam prep course and they just feel that they need something additional. So it gives them the ability to interact with a coach to help them prepare, help them understand where they're at, and then teaches them to come up with a nice study plan and helps them any areas that they may be facing a challenge to prepare for the exam.
And then lastly, blended training. What is that?
So blended training is kind of a mix between the two. So typically when students go through a PMP boot camp, it's typically very intense where they still have to do a lot of studying outside the class. So blended learning takes the approach of building in instructor-led training, not as many hours as a boot camp. But typically you're still going to get somewhere into the 3-day range, 18 to 24 hours range of instructor-led. But it's also going to lay out a plan where they're building in using other materials such as your exam simulator, the podcast videos, and maybe in an all-in-one inclusive book to prepare for the exam. So it has part classroom and also incorporates a plan to use some of the other materials for self-study.
And how important is self-study in all of these three approaches? You've mentioned it a couple of times.
It is absolutely extremely critical to prepare for the exam. It's unfortunate whenever you have a student that comes in with an expectation into a boot camp and they believe if they just sit through the course for 4 days, they're going to be prepared to pass the exam, which is very, very rare, or a person that's very unique capability would have that. But typically, you're going to have to do a lot of studying outside of a classroom environment to prepare for the exam.
From your explanation, the boot camp and the coaching seemed quite similar. You have a trainer, he's teaching. Where exactly lies the difference there, the big difference between the boot camp and the PMP coaching?
The coaching is more focused. It is a boot camp is going to offer you somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 to 5 days of instructor-led training. A coaching session is going to be typically 1 hour a week for somewhere between 5 and 10 weeks. So the hands-on time is much less between your coach and the student. But what it does is it provides the individual attention covering the topics that you need to know, and then also helping you develop a study plan to move forward.
Oh, I see. So the boot camp is more of the fire hose, 4 days of here, eat, drink, learn this. All packed together, whereas in the coaching, it's spread out and you get in touch with the coach during those weeks and say, hey, I have problems with this, I have problems with that. And then in the next coaching session, the coach adjusts his or her style to the student and looks at just those items.
Yes, absolutely. The coaching is very individual, focused on the individual student's needs, whereas in a boot camp, you're going to have a lot of other students, and there's a predefined curriculum and a course that the instructor is going to go through. So they're going to start out, at the beginning of day 1, walk you through the material to the end of day 4. So it's highly intense. It is exactly what you're trying to say is it's a fire hose approach. The instructor is just presenting a ton of information, and then the students has to try to absorb all of that information within 4 days of highly intense material. An analogy I like to use with the PMP boot camps is that a lot of students, when a student goes through law school to prepare to become a lawyer, they go through 3 years of law school. At the end of 3 years of law school, they have to take a bar exam to become a lawyer. So they may take an exam prep course for the bar exam, a bar exam prep course, and that prep course is just highlighting all the material that they may see on the exam, but it's not actually teaching them. So it's kind of that fire hose approach with the PMP boot camp. The PMP boot camp is just presenting high-level material of what you may see on the exam, and then the student has to have the ability to have had or seen that information beforehand to assimilate it to how they can interpret it to pass the exam.
Yeah, at this point, it's maybe good to mention that when we're talking about PMP exam preparation, we're not talking about teaching the student project management, right? We're teaching them how to pass the exam and what they need to know.
Exactly. And a lot of students will On occasion, we'll see a student who didn't read or didn't understand that and show up for the first day of a PMP boot camp that doesn't have the experience or the background to understand that. And they're hoping that if they sit through a 4-day course, that their 4-day boot camp, that they're going to be able to understand how to be a project manager, which is not the case, because it is presenting how to pass the exam, not necessarily how to be a project manager.
Right. Are any of these three options better than the other ones?
I would say it's completely up to the student's learning style and what's the best approach for them. For example, if you had been doing a lot of studying and you're looking for, or if you've been having trouble studying, but you have the experience and you have the knowledge and you have some background with the PMBOK guide, and you're looking for time away from work in a dedicated session that you can go through, pick up the information you can use that week to study, then the PMP Bootcamp is a great process for you. If you're trying to process the material over time, then maybe the blended course works well for you. If you're doing a lot of self-study and you just need a little bit of extra help, or if you've taken the exam beforehand and you weren't successful in your first or second attempt and you're looking for some additional guidance, then coaching works best for you. So it really all depends on the students, their learning styles, and the information that they need to help them pass the exam.
Which of these did you personally use when you got ready to take your own PMP exam?
I actually did kind of a combination. I actually did a master's certificate program that taught project management over a series of months. It was a 2-day course on cost management, a 2-day course on scope management. And I did that over a course of time, and that was teaching project management. And then after I did that, I wanted to go get more experience. I actually went and worked in the field for a couple of years. And then when I decided to actually pass the exam, I did an all-in-one study guide and then an exam simulator. So I did a lot of self-study at that point. But I had a lot of experience, and I had gone through a course to teach project management.
Let's jump into the pros and cons of these three options. So what are the pros and the cons of a bootcamp? And maybe you could also tell us when you would advise somebody to go the route of a bootcamp.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we were just discussing that in terms of the fire hose. So the bootcamp is great for the person who has the experience and background related to project management and had some exposure through other classes or their company organization, their culture, to the PMBOK and how the PMBOK approaches things. So that's a great course for those types of students where they're having trouble dedicating the time outside of work or in their personal life, and they really want a dedicated, focused time in a short amount of time where they can go review the information, understand what's on the exam, and then just use that time to be very focused for them to prepare for the exam. And again, it's going to require them to have the high absorption rate for them to drink from the fire hose. So so somebody in that scenario, I'd highly recommend the PMP Bootcamp, where they need something to force them to study for the exam. And a PMP Bootcamp is great for that dedicated focus time for them to sit through the course, absorb the information, understand what's on the exam. Then even coming out of the boot camp, there's still going to be work for them to do to prepare for the exam, especially taking practice exams. So using the exam simulators to take practice exams over and over again until they're scoring, a decent score for them to sit for the real exam. So I think that's the pros for the type of student I'd recommend for that. The students I want to make sure everybody understands is, if you're trying to learn project management or you don't have that experience, then that might not necessarily be the best course for you. So maybe doing some self-study, maybe doing a blended course or coaching that's spread out over time might be a better alternative for you. But the PMP boot camps, the downfalls is the amount of information in such a short amount of time, and people's absorption rate is one of the downfalls for those courses.
What are the pros and the cons of PMP coaching, and who should be coached?
So coaching is great for anyone who needs that extra help for preparing for the exam, whether it's extra reassurance, determining what went wrong on their first attempt if they were not successful, and helping them figure out a study plan. It's also great for somebody who's doing a lot of studying, they have a lot of experience, but then they're just having trouble with one specific area. They've been a project manager for years, they understand everything, but in their job, they don't do a lot with cost management or earned value management, and they're having trouble with that specific topic. So coaching can help them focus on, let me explain this topic to you, let me help you understand it, let me assess your needs, helping you determine that study plan. So that is what coaching is for, and that's the ideal student for those. So anyone looking for that extra help with their study plans, helping determine what went wrong on a prior attempt of the exam, or just filling out those specific areas. Now, one thing I want to mention is that a coach also, as any good coach would do, is also going to provide the tough love. So if somebody, as I've interviewed and talked to people, they're saying, hey, I tried this, or, and they really didn't, or it's not enough, or, I have experience, so I can't pass this. So the coach will provide that true criticism or that true constructive criticism or tough love to them to tell them what they need to do.
And then, of course, lastly, what are the pros and the cons of blended training, and who should consider that?
So blended training is kind of the cross between the coaching and the instructor-led course. So typically the blended learning is going to provide a lot of the information that you may see, but they may spread it out either in 3 days, but they're also going to come up with a study plan. So possibly before the class, they're going to say, hey, read this material, review these prepcast videos, take these simulated exams, and then they're going to follow up with a plan after the class. Here are the topics that you need to review, and here's how you're going to review them. So it spreads it out or comes up with a plan. So it's not the fire hose approach to them. It's providing a plan over days, how they're going to map out and the topics that they need to. But it also provides them an environment of, somewhere in the neighborhood of 18 to 24 hours of instructor-led classroom training, in addition to providing a self-study plan for them to review podcasts, take practice exams, read chapters out of an all-in-one book.
Yeah, that was kind of the way that I did it way back when. I took a classroom-based training from my local PMI chapter. It was spread out over the course of 8 weeks, always on Saturday morning and Saturday afternoon. In the morning, we looked at one chapter, one knowledge area from the PMBOK guide, and then in the afternoon, we looked at another one. And so after 8 weeks, you got taught everything you needed to know. It was, there was a bit of a fire hose on Saturday, and then, you had a week to review the material and look ahead and study the next chapters as well. So it was actually quite good. So it was a form of blended training here. Let me take you back to the first thing that you mentioned, the study plan. How important is the study plan really for PMP candidates? It must be important because it was the first thing that you talked about.
Yeah, absolutely. The study plan is the most important thing for a student to know and understand. So it's going to take a lot of effort to pass the exam. And as I mentioned, a project manager comes up with a plan for their project. You have to think about passing the exam as a project. So the first thing you have to assess is understand your learning style. So with your learning style, how much experience do you have? What type of learning or classroom that we've talked about approach to studying works best for you? So do you need that focused, dedicated time in a PMP bootcamp? Do you need it spread out over time so you're learning some information, then you're reinforcing it through self-study? Or do you just have you been self-studying and you just need that little extra help with coaching? So understanding your learning style, what works best for you, picking a study method, such as coaching, blended learning, self-study, or a boot camp, and then coming up with a timeline for what you're going to accomplish, how much you're going to review, what practice tests you're going to take, and then when you're going to actually fill out the application and sit for the exam is highly important to be successful at passing the exam.
You are both a PMP trainer and also a PMP coach. And you told me before this interview that you have, in fact, changed how you teach your prep courses today. How have you changed them?
So one of the biggest things, I always look to try to improve the way I help students prepare for the exam. So I tend to try to get more one-on-one time with them, even in a boot camp setting, just to understand where they're at, what knowledge they have, where their challenges are, and then help them try to prepare a study plan. So even outside the classroom. So coming up with a study plan, helping them determine things that they can do outside the classroom. So what sources that they can use to help them study, what exam simulators, how they read and interpret questions. So I'll actually bring more questions into the classroom to help them understand how to take those. In addition, I also make sure I try to assess and understand as they interact with students, what is the best way for them. So do they need possibly, and even telling them, possibly if you don't have the experience in terms of project management, you may want to consider that kind of project management fundamentals type course before taking a boot camp.
So how do you deal with the fire hose effect, with all the information that you have to give the students?
Unfortunately, in a PMP boot camp, that's the way the course is designed. It's designed to start off on the morning of day one with kind of giving an overview of what the exam is like. At the end of the last day, finishing up with either the last chapter in the PMBOK guide or figuring out closing, and then also giving here's some best practices for preparing for the exam and things to expect. So unfortunately, that's the way the course is designed. So what I've done as I've been teaching these, I try to get more one-on-one with the students. So I try to understand their needs. I try to help them understand how to prepare for the exam, how much effort they're going to need to put into it outside of the classroom, and then helping them develop a study plan on how to reinforce the information that they're going to hear over those 4 days, and how to take that back and actually implement a study plan and prepare for them to pass the exam. And again, that's going to be the same things we've talked about as reinforcing using an exam simulator, reinforcing other materials on how to, whether it's just reading the PMBOK guide, whether it's using an all-in-one study guide or the PrepCast videos, but incorporating them into preparing to pass the exam with the information that they have available to them. So that's one of the biggest things. And again, also with the fire hose effect, I try to make sure that I'm using real live examples in the course, simple things that they can understand, that they can relate to. So I have a lot of storytelling in my courses. And then I also constantly look for feedback from them. Are you comprehending? Are you bringing it into? And then wherever I can, anything that I can get them to practice doing, something that they might see on the exam, I will have them do that. And a lot of that relates to some of the formulas with earned value or expected monetary value, or even drawing out network diagrams. So anything I can do to help them develop a plan to complete studying to pass the exam is really where I try to get one-on-one with them to make sure that they're capturing the information to the best of their abilities during the course, and then what they're not capturing, helping them develop a study plan to pass the exam.
If I hear you right, then even if your students take a boot camp with you and you're in front of them as, Jim, the PMP trainer, they're still going to get Jim, the PMP coach. Maybe not as intense as if it's a one-on-one coaching, but, in your boot camps, you also seem to be giving a lot of PMP coaching to your students.
I do, but that ends at the end of the fourth day. So, So
it's just during that. So there's no after the boot camp getting back to you, hey, I have problems here. Then that would mean, okay, so now there is a coaching involved. There would be an additional fee for your time.
I'll typically answer emails or simple questions for people that have gone through the boot camps.
Right.
But typically, if coaching or something makes sense, then that might be the appropriate route for them to follow up with.
Right. So what do you recommend to your students these days when they come to you and say, I want to pass the PMP exam? What do you recommend? How should I personally prepare to pass this test?
Well, I think everyone is different. They come from different backgrounds, different learning styles, different experiences. So I'm going to ask them questions to try to figure out what is the best way for them to prepare for the exam, and take the considerations in their experiences, their knowledge, how they like to study, how much hands-on time that they need. And then based upon that, I'll make a recommendation. So it could be self-study, it could be coaching, it could be blended learning, it could be a PMP boot camp. And it's all going to depend on the individual and what's going to work best for them. And again, it's their ability and their commitment to self-study or to prepare for the exam is going to be based on my recommendation.
We started our interview with some action items for our listeners. And now we are going to close the interview with some non-action items. Please tell us, what are the top few time wasters in regards to PMP exam preparation that you have seen over the past few years? Things that, you don't have to do this to pass the PMP exam. And then maybe you could also tell us and give us your recommendation, instead of doing this time waster, focus more on this. Do this here. That will be much better for your exam preparation.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that I have students do is they're continually searching the internet for I don't know what to call it, kind of the golden key to the PMP exam. So I'll have students bring in saying, hey, I found this brain dump. I found this cheat sheet, whatever you want to call it, on the internet. I wanted to share it with the rest of the class, and then they'll share it with me, and I'll take a look at it. And you can tell it's based off the Pinbock 3rd version. So typically a lot of the information they're finding is old or outdated or poorly written or poorly describing the exam. So trying to find that golden key off the internet on how to simplify the pass the exam is one of the biggest time wasters I've seen, because it can also cause a lot of confusion if they actually use the materials or the bad questions. So there's a lot of good sources that you recommend. I highly recommend using that as a vetted source, and just spend your time using the proven techniques that we've recommended. So either the PrepCast videos, the exam simulators, the all-in-one prep books, any one of those methods are highly qualified, highly good material. So those are the things I recommend using, and stop trying to find, the golden key off the internet or the other sources that are out there.
All right, Jim, thank you so much for your time today.
No problem. Thank you very much.
And that was our interview with Jim Kokenauer and how to study for the PMP exam. If you are preparing for your PMP exam, then the best way you can calm the butterflies in your stomach is to take practice exams. Our PMP exam simulator offers you 9 such practice exams. To see how it works and take a free test drive, please go to freeexamsimulator.com. And that's it. Thank you very much for listening. As always, you can find us on the web at pm-podcast.com. Please send your emails to info@pm-podcast.com, and when you write, please do tell me where in the world you are writing from. And finally, we have this. I am such a pessimist that every project has surpassed what I envisioned. Until next time.